Hobart, Jay, Hobart, that's got to be like in Arizona or something. Is that Arizona? I'm just guessing. I'm not sure where Hobart is. Naples 93, Naperville, okay. Outside of Chicago. Tennessee's 87, okay. Everybody's pretty warm across the board. Who else? People jumping on right now. Charlotte at 86, okay. Is anybody having some, like, other than heat, is anybody having some bad weather? Anybody having like any storms? I haven't heard anything, but I don't typically watch the Weather Channel, so I wouldn't probably know unless something was really going on. Winter Haven, all right. Well, you're down there in Florida. Charlotte, 86. Great. We'll get a couple more minutes while people are jumping on here. San Francisco, oh, nice, cool 68. Yeah, San Francisco would have temperatures like that. Make us all a little bit jealous. Very good, very good. All right, we'll get started here in just a minute. The chat's the way you can really ask your questions tonight. I'm going to go through a presentation. I'm going to keep it relatively tight. It's going to be conceptual, not going to be so much tactical, but conceptual, which I think is most important. But I certainly am glad to have you ask your questions. So if you ask questions, put your questions in the chat. Just type them as we go. And when I get to the end of my presentation tonight, I will take time to go back and we'll curate out the questions. And I'm happy to answer questions. So feel free to do that. I won't leave you hanging. I like to answer questions. I'd rather actually be in an audience where I can just talk to you to answer questions, but there's too many people on a webinar for me to have an open season like that. So we will do it with the chat. So again, if you're just jumping on, jump into the chat, type in where you're from and what your high temperature has been today. And we'll use that same chat for asking questions. I'm gonna go ahead and close my chat out because I don't need to look at that right now, but you all continue to use it as you wish. Kansas, what's your temperature in Kansas? You're probably pretty warm in Kansas. Windy. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started here. Okay, the topic for tonight's presentation is building your financial arc. And obviously this has biblical meanings. I think it also applies very much to us today in our own lives. We'll get into a little bit about where we are in the economy, the market cycle, the longer term secular cycle. But I think this is a time, if ever, that people need to be on the forefront of maybe shifting models and shifting plans. So let's get into it. This is a book by Carmen Reinhart and Kenneth Rogoff. It's written back about 2011, so more than a decade ago, but it's very appropriate. Reinhart and Rogoff have done a lot of studies. They are deep into economics, and basically the title of this book, as you can see, is "This Time is Different: 8 Centuries of Financial Folly." Essentially, just to give you the cliff notes of the book, this time isn't different. They make the statements that excessive debt accumulations, whether it be by the government, banks, corporations, or consumers, often poses greater systemic risks than it seems during a boom. And we have certainly been in a major boom cycle coming out of 2008, and particularly coming out of COVID. Massive extrapolation of the monetary system across the board globally, but certainly here in this country. They go on to say such large-scale debt buildups pose risks because they make an economy vulnerable to crises of confidence, particularly when debt is short-term and needs to be constantly refinanced. Well, our government is probably in the midst of all that, as you well know. Our sovereign national debt is exceeded 35 trillion, and a lot of the debt that we have to roll over, meaning refinance, is a lot of it's in short-term treasuries. In fact, the government's probably in the worst shape, more so than corporate is today. But nobody's in good shape. Consumers in the last year have piled on massive amounts of debt, credit card debt, auto loan debt, student loan debt, just paying normal lifestyle bills. So the credit and debt expansion is massive today across the board. They go on to say highly leveraged economies can seem to be merely rolling along for an extended period when bang, confidence collapses, lenders disappear, and a crisis hits. This is so typical. And I think you're here tonight because you realize this euphoria, this mania of the markets we've seen, asset bubbles that have gone up tremendously, again, coming out of 2008, back 2011, 12, and really riding these market highs. it goes on and goes on until it doesn't. And then we have what's called reversion to the mean. Again, this happens every cycle, every major cycle. The highs turn into lows, drop before the mean, before they come back up again. It's just a matter of, how do you hedge yourself against that kind of thing? That's what we'll talk about tonight. They say that 8 centuries of experience suggests that this time is not different. Now, if you're just jumping on, please use the chat and ask questions. Just type them in the chat as we go along, because I'm going to come back at the end of the discussion tonight and actually answer questions for you on specifics. I'm going to give you macro views tonight. Macro views meaning what's the overall principles that we need to look at regarding the economy, and then we can start to blend into strategies. Tactically, I'm not going to get too deep tactically, because that would be a disservice to you. You have to understand the concepts where you fit in the scheme of things before you can start making decisions on where you might position yourself. I mentioned a minute ago, and this actually, we took this screenshot, I think 2 weeks ago, when the national debt had not quite tripped over 35 trillion. Now we're well into 35 trillion. Take a look at the federal budget deficit. Now, I'm not sure why there's an official and actual. I have no idea, but you can see we're at $2 trillion over expenditures over what we take in revenues. I mean, that's $2 trillion a year. That's a massive number. Look at the debt per citizen, 103,000. Debt per taxpayer, 266,000. The U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio, look where it is today as opposed to 24 years ago, 122%. When back in 2000 it was 57%. We had a low of 34% in 1980, and back in 1960 we're at 52. These numbers should extol some expediency on your thinking about where we are, what's gotten you to here today, which I'm sure you're all hardworking and successful by your own right. But the problem I see is what got us to where we are today, notwithstanding the hard work we put into everything we do, it's not going to be the same thing that's going to carry us forward. And I think that's the key to my presentation. If I could give you anything at all tonight, it's just beware of relying on past models, even to the success you've had. The current state of affairs. I'm going to read this really quickly because there's a lot of bullets here, but just stay with me. 40 years of decreasing costs of capital. We went from highs of interest rates back in 1980 at 20%, federal funds rate, prime rate 20%, and we saw a 40-year decline all the way down to the low in summer of 2020, 4 years ago, right after COVID, when we hit essentially zero in this 0% interest rates in this country. In Europe, they are actually negative. So this is like a golden era in lifestyle and wealth building. We've had massive tailwinds for 40 years, and most of you have been a part of that. I really have had that my whole lifetime. And so I can sit here and say, wow, I've really done well in life. And I'm going to talk about, the things I've done in real estate. And I'm not saying you should look at me and say, wow, David, you're so great and amazing, because I'm not. I'm just like you. I worked hard at what I've done, but a little bit of my success has been in timing. And I understand a lot about what's happened over the years and why it's so important to be diligent about what's probably happening next. Probably. No one has a crystal ball, but there's certainly some clues we can gain from history. 30 years of globalization, meaning that we've had low inflation primarily because we offshored a lot of our manufacturing. I mean, China for sure, right? And so we decreased our labor costs, supply costs, and fed technology. That's what's really kept inflation down over these years. You saw it happen with COVID when the supply chains got disrupted. Very quickly, we saw inflation kick back up, and Federal Reserve told us it was transitory. I say it's not transitory. I think we're going to have very sustainable inflation over many, many years. I'll tell you why in a minute. 14 years, coming out of 2008, great financial crisis. We had 14 years of debt-based economy, debt-based. So just like in your own life, if you rely on debt to carry the load for your lifestyle, at some point that runs out. The only reason this country gets away with it is because we've had the dollar as a reserve currency. Even that is suspect, I think, going forward. And so again, the high life that this country has lived off of for many years, I think it's going to be coming to an end. Not this year, not next year, but I think the decade, this rest of this decade and going forward, we have to be very aware that what we've had has not been based on fundamental economic principles. The COVID factor really opened the floodgates and allowed politicians to feel like they can spend whatever with no consequences. I mean, that's where we are today, right? We've got increased geopolitical volatility. I mean, things are blowing up around the world, and we, basically 4 years prior to this, we had relative stability. Fiscal spending deficits, I just mentioned on the last table with the debt, $2 trillion per year. Unfunded liabilities, that's Medicare, Social Security, and other entitlements, over $200 trillion. That's off balance sheet. They don't even talk about that. Financial leverage, it's a house of cards. It is every time. It works until the day it doesn't. Taxes are only going to go up. They have to. We're going to have to deal with inflation and higher interest rates for longer, in my opinion. We've also got major cultural shifts, values, work ethic, frustration. Young people totally frustrated. I totally get it. And pushing more people to increase government dependence. None of this is good or healthy. And of course, we have an election coming up in just a few months. So just a few things to look at, a few variables that might throw a monkey wrench into the best laid plans. But you might say it's all worked before. Every time we have a recession or the financial markets drop, the Fed comes to the rescue, they lower interest rates, they go into quantitative easing, they print money, essentially. But will it continue to work? Debt is a major problem. This time is different because of the debt. The key word here is change. You may be familiar with Neil Howe, the work he did with William Strauss. They wrote the first book, The Fourth Turning, back in the late 90s. Neil Howe subsequently updated it just this last year, and he says now the fourth turning is here. Essentially talking about the fact that we go through these major cycles, major secular cycles, 20 years at a time. In the fourth turning, we're in it right now, right in the middle of the fourth turning. Basically, just understand he's saying fundamental changes. And I just listed a whole list of those things right now for you. He talks about we're going through a major reset period right now. Howard Oakes, which is the other graphic here. That's Howard Oakes of Oak Tree Capital. He's talked about the last year and a half about going through a major sea change. Essentially the same thing, major secular cycle change, not a market cycle by itself, but secular cycle. This is the fundamentals that most people are oblivious to. Yes, we go through market cycles as well, and we're in both right now. We're in a market cycle tipping, but also a major secular cycle change. Two happening at the same time. It can be for some pretty significant changes. Just basically looking at market cycles. I'll let you take a quick look at this, but you understand market cycles aren't this smooth, but basically we have the upswing of a market cycle, the euphoria, which I think in some asset classes, we're still in euphoria. On others, we are dropping down, still in denial in a lot of areas. It won't be long before we hit the fear and panic button and go into the valley of the cycle. And then we have got to ride that out. I think the valley is going to stay with us longer going forward. I think we're still see a lot of volatility, but we're not going to have the big upswing again. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. So the decades ahead, a new secular cycle. This is a 40-year cycle, long cycle has begun. Looking for probably slower or very anemic growth. The demographics. Our country's aging out. The birth rate is way down. My generation, the boomers, I'm right in the middle of the boomers generation, and we're retiring out on a regular basis. And in fact, some of the cohorts in my generation are actually dying out at this point. Higher for longer interest rates. I think that's for sure. Why? Because of the debt. The only way to deal with the debt is to monetize it, which creates inflation. And the only way to deal with inflation is to have higher interest rates. It's not all up to the Federal Reserve. The bond market, massive market, way more than the stock market, financial markets, the bond market, I should say equities markets. The bond market's what deals with what extrapolates out to the longer term interest rates, the 10-year, the 30-year. Federal Reserve has nothing to do with that. They can't control it. Persistent inflation, which again is why we're going to have higher interest rates for longer. Going back to the 70s, we called it stagflation. I was in my late teenage years in the 70s, so I knew what it was about, but of course I didn't have any business or I didn't have any investments back then, but I do a lot of study of that time period. Certainly my parents were going through it. Some of you may have parents or grandparents that went through it. It's good to go back and study history because I really believe that this is where we are going forward from here. It's different than what we've known in the last 40 years, certainly the last 15 years. Stagflation looked like this back in really from the late 60s all the way to the early 80s. It was this period where they call it a lost decade, where essentially there was like no growth. I mean, the stock market was just like flat. But there was still high cost of living. So you have inflation, high cost of living with no growth. Doesn't sound like too much fun, does it? It's certainly not what we've been used to in the last decades. And that's why I say we've got to look at things differently going forward, sort of change our expectations. change of the fundamentals is not something to say it's a doom and gloom, but to realize that these changes are here and how you may want to get in front of it, not only from an investment business standpoint, but also from just a reality standpoint of how you want to live your life. I'll tell you a little bit more about mine in a minute, but how I changed some of my expectations, and it's made a huge difference for me, a huge difference. So which of these topics is most relevant to you? Alex, I think we've got a poll. Do you want to run the poll? Just got a few questions. I want to see what's interesting to you. So here's the poll. Which of these topics is most relevant? Just pick one. This is all anonymous, by the way. We don't know who's answering what, so just let us know. Current state of the stock market. Are you concerned about highs, lows, future direction? Volatility and uncertainty. How are you preparing for the unpredictable nature of the market? The growing national debt, fiscal deficit. Does this impact your financial strategy? Interest rates and inflation. How are these factors influencing your decisions and decision making? Are there critical decisions you've been hesitant to make? Just go ahead and pick one of those. And Alex, once you've seen those roll over, then you can share the results just to see where everybody stands. So just take another half a minute to read through those and pick what you think is most relevant to you. I'd love to see your feedback and kind of where you stand today and what concerns you, what questions you have. We'll kind of wait till we get the majority of you to respond to that, and then we'll share the results. So I'll let you do that whenever you want to, Alex.
Yep, we still have just a few answers coming in.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, there's quite a bit to delve into there. So take your time and read through it, so we get some good feedback.
There we go. Here's the results, David.
All right. They're not.
Are you able to see that, or I can read it?
I cannot. You may need to read it for me.
You bet. So it looks like the significant majority went to just two categories. One is volatility and uncertainty. How are you preparing for the unpredictable nature of the market? That was 33%. Also tied for first place was decision making. Are there critical decisions you've been hesitant to make? That was at 33%. And then the runner-up was at 21%. That's the current state of the stock market specifically. Are you concerned about its highs, lows, or future direction? And then the other two options had just 6% each, the growing national debt and interest rates and inflation.
Okay, great. All right, thanks for participating. That helps me a lot. Oh, there, now it just showed up for me. Great. Okay, I can see it now. All right, I'm going to close it on my end, and let's continue on. Oh, well, there's the actual questions right there. I guess I could have just flipped through, but you already saw them, so let's move on. All right, so de-risking your portfolio. So again, this will kind of line up with some of the concerns that you had, like the current state of the stock market. So let's kind of handle that right now, and some of the volatility that we're seeing today. So I'm going to show you a framework, but I'm going to talk through the framework first. So I look at, where's my insurance? And one place I look, this is just me, at precious metals. I'm not saying I go overboard there, but precious metals provides me liquidity and does provide me a hedge. Now, it does not provide, as you know, any dividends or cash flow. So you have to keep that in mind. But I like to have some liquidity that has that is non-correlated to the stock market or the dollar, because I think we're going to have more devaluation of the dollar going forward. Now, for additional liquidity, treasuries and income-producing cash equivalents. So cash equivalents, meaning something, again, that is highly liquid. Precious metals are highly liquid. So are treasuries, money market accounts, CDs, other kinds of short-term bonds are relatively liquid. So you can call those, cash equivalents. So I want to keep a certain amount of that handy, not just to have some margin, but also because there's going to be opportunities coming that I might want to roll those shorter-term maturity income producers into more equities at the right time. Again, emphasize at the right time. Whoops. And then lastly, which is important, I still need some inflation hedge. Even though I see disinflation right now, I think that's going to be relatively short-term. Short-term meaning next year, 18 months. Long-term, I see a lot of inflation. So I want to be looking at what I can use today to some degree and add to it as I see the right time to go back into more hard assets and equities where I can get both cash flow and growth, inflation hedge. And oftentimes that also comes with tax benefits. So what's that balance look like? here's my portfolio allocation in a triangle. And if you look at the bottom, that's where I have the safety, the margin. I call it the moat, like the moat around a castle, right? That's protective. That's my insurance. And again, that could be treasuries, precious metals, anything that's short term, that's highly liquid. On the right side of the triangle is what I talked about, the income. Income is like your oxygen, the cash flow, right? Now, if I'm working for it, active income, which most of you are probably doing right now, that's part of your lifeblood. Eventually, you're going to want to transfer your capital base to assets that will produce that replacement income for you so that you can do what? We'll take more time off or eventually, quote, retire. That's the whole idea. So learning how to do that, particularly in a marketplace that's changing, is going to be very, very critical for everybody to figure that out. How that looks. That's a big part of what we do in Freedom Founders is look at the markets, dissect them, and figure out where, when we should put money into certain asset classes. On that left side of the triangle would be the growth and inflation hedge. And that's also where I see opportunity. As the market turns over, then we can buy back into equities. And whether you like the stock market, that's fine, or other tangible hard assets, which is really my bias. But either way, finding the right time to buy back into equities, because again, that's the sexy part of our strategy. That's what we love when bull markets are running. We want to be in equities of some kind, because that's where things go up. That's where we've seen the stock market hitting all-time highs, NASDAQ, tech stocks. I mean, that's amazing. It's a good feeling, but it doesn't last forever, right? And the problem is the higher it goes, the greater it drops when the correction hits. So I think that's where some of your concerns came from, which I think are well placed regarding the volatility and where the stock market is today. Got to be careful. We have to do the same thing in real estate, by the way. It's no different. Equities and real estate hit all-time highs. You got to know when to come back down in what I call the capital stack, and we'll touch on that. Here's something that's interesting. Billionaires buying farmland. So Bill Gates has purchased over 268,000 acres of farmland in the U.S. Jeff Bezos, 400,000. Ted Turner, another media mogul, 2 million, and another billionaire, John Malone, over 2 million acres. Why are they buying farmland? Well, it's a tangible asset. Now, it's not what I go by, because I'm not a millionaire, mega millionaire, billionaire. But if I had that kind of money and I want a safe place to put it, what they're saying is put it as close to the earth as you can, into the earth. Now, again, you could say precious metals and other commodities that come out of the earth. I think that's valid as well. I'm not going to talk a lot about commodities, but I think there's a place for them. For me, the next step to just buying land, which doesn't produce any cash flow, but it's a great inflation hedge, very, very safe, would be some kind of real estate improvements on top of that land. So that's where I go, and that's where probably most of you are thinking tonight in terms of alternatives in real estate. But I think it's interesting to know that the really wealthy are putting their money there. None of these people are really keyed up on their retirement plan or 401ks. Now, they may have something there. I don't know. Maybe they're doing it for their grandkids. I don't know. But it's not where they made their money and not where they're preserving their capital. I think that's something to be aware of. So the capital stack. So real briefly, this applies to any investments, particularly whether you're in the stock market or say in real estate. So let's compare and contrast. In the stock market, you've got your stocks, which would be your equities. So that's the teal color above. And then you have your bonds, which is debt. So just look at the basic colors, teal and the red color. We don't have to get into the different tranches there, but that's what we look at when we invest. And again, for big growth, when things are running well, we put our money into what? Equities, stocks. On the other side, the corollary is, well, when you want to be more conservative, you typically go to bonds or the debt side. Well, we do the same thing in real estate. Equities, again, is the sexy thing that everybody wants. Right now, in many cases, probably majority of cases, people are late to the game. They've been looking at what's happened in the past and going, I want some of that, and they're late. Where I tend to be more so today in the last 18 months is more on the debt side, owning debt or account receivables, debt secured by real estate. I still want to be secured by something that's close to the land. I don't like financial products because they're just paper. I want something that's got security. So when I do real estate today, a lot of it, a great deal of it, is positioned on having security against the real estate, but I'm in a debt position, which is a lot safer than an equity position. But there'll be a time when I'll start to switch back to equities. That's just a little basic primer on the capital stack. All right, so real quickly, who am I? Some of you may know my story, but I'm going to keep it really brief tonight because this is not about me. But what I want to relate to you is how we have a lot of similarities, even though I may be potentially older than a lot of you. I think giving you a vision of what I went through in my life, what I discovered, may give you a little bit more of a feeling of not feeling so maybe frustrated and helpless as you may feel with all the variables and uncertainty that we see today. I did own and manage a private practice for over 20 years. But I started in real estate when I was actually in dental school. So I was doing both tandem. I had like dual careers, if you will. Uh, Real estate was on the sideline. Obviously, dentistry was my active income that generated the cash flow that I could put into real estate. The other thing, obviously, I was a father. I still am a father, thank goodness, and a husband. And trying to do all three things was not easy. We didn't have our only child, Jenna, until my spouse was a year younger, like 35 years old. That's a little bit older, right? So it gave me a little bit more time to build the practice and also be building real estate. If I had a child or family early on in life, there's no way I could have done all three. There's no way. I'm not saying I did even two of those or the third thing really well, because things happen in our lives that change things, but everything worked out in the end. As I said here in the notes, my daughter faced high-risk leukemia as a very young child. Then she went through a stage where she had really breakout seizures, not uncontrolled seizures. And then at age 12, which is exactly 20 years ago, in this month, in August, she had to go through a liver transplant. She'd been in end-stage liver failure for the 2 months prior due to chemotherapy and all the drugs that really were too toxic for her liver. And her liver was in end stage. It wouldn't filter anymore. And so by the grace of God, she got a liver from another child who passed away. But that was the turning point in my life when I decided I needed more time. I didn't need more revenue. I didn't need more EBITDA. I didn't need more equity. I needed time. But I was only in my 40s. So how do you come to grips with that, right? I'm still got to be financially responsible. What I'm giving to you is probably not your story. Hopefully it's not your story, but you may be thinking the same thing. We're set up in life to go out and, kind of conquer the world for our families, right? To build security, to build financial resources that can provide for, a good lifestyle and provide the things we want for our families. And that's all good. The problem is we never know how much is enough, and we don't really have good pathways to get there, whatever there is. And I'll talk about, how to set the there up, because that's the thing that I think trips people up today is you never know how much you got to do. It's just like, I need to do more because someone else out there is doing more than I am. I can look on social media and someone else has got more practice, bigger practices, more ops, more revenue. Everybody's doing better, and I need to do more too. And there's a fallacy in that is something you don't want to get into the trap of. Real estate's what gave me the option, and I can say the key thing is option, back in my 40s, to leave the practice, to sell the practice, to get time to be with my daughter. That was the most important thing to me, and that was a good move on my part. I have no regrets at all. I could have gone back to dentistry. I just didn't. This gave me time, options, the peace of mind. So lifestyle liabilities versus margin. I want you to understand this. I've never lived a big lifestyle. I mean, we live in a nice house on a golf course. It's all paid for. I've lived in the same house for over 30 years. I drive a 2009 Lexus RX 350. Really proud of it because it's got like 180,000 miles on it and it just runs like a clock. I don't care about materialism. Not judging anything that you want in your life. I'm just saying that because of what I've gone through in my life, I put in the forefront relationships, my family, way above that other stuff. I could have that other stuff, but it also, what having other stuff creates for me is like tension. Tension because it means there's stuff I have to keep up with. I got to pay property taxes. I got to pay insurance. I got to pay maintenance, upkeep. I worry about too much stuff. I just only want to worry. I don't want to say overuse the word worry, but I want to be involved with people and memories. I don't want to be dealing with stuff. I'd rather rent stuff. I'll rent an Airbnb somewhere in Colorado for 3 months. I'll rent a boat or rent a yacht for someone else to. I'm not going to buy that stuff, even though I could have it. It just doesn't make sense to me. That's what I call creating margin. Creating margin. So again, the graphics here. You can have lifestyle, which my lifestyle never looks like the one on the left, but some people do. Some people want that, and that's okay. You're just making a trade. You're making a choice. I'd rather create margin in my life so I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to have the stress, and particularly when we go into economic downturns or recessions, if I'm not leveraged up to the hilt and I've got room, I don't have to sweat it out. I'm not over leveraged. I don't have to have to sell off assets like a lot of people do when tough times come. So this is just something to think about. It's something we go into great detail with Freedom Founders members in the blueprint weekends, which we do with spouses as couples, and really help them really focus on what's important, because you can't really figure out where you want to go in life until you understand what's important, and then you reverse engineer to say where you are today. I'm giving a little bit of a forethought into how I look at things and how I've designed my life and help other people do theirs. So here's another question for you. I'm gonna have Alex put the poll. This has only got 2 questions or 2 answers, so it's easier than the last one. How do you feel that you index at home with your family and your close relationships? Number 1, I'm under indexing. I got to read it from here now. Let's see. Under indexing, or 10, I'm over indexing. So where do you fall in the scheme of things in your life? I just told you where I was in my life, where for a long time I was under indexing at home, over indexing at work, but I flipped the switch to turn it around, and I'm really happy I did. So pick your number between 1 and 10. Where do you feel like you're on that scale? 1 being the low point of your under indexing at home, 10 like you're maybe overdoing it. Maybe you're not working hard enough. So take a minute to pick your number on that scale of 1 to 10. Pick your number, and as soon as Alex sees enough people that have completed that, then we'll share and see where people are. This is a place, again, where it's anonymous, so you can just be open and honest with yourself. I always tell people that no progress begins until we start to tell the truth. And it's easier to tell the truth when you don't have to like raise your hand in front of a crowd, because I know that's always hard. But when you can be honest with yourself, that's where real change starts to happen. And that's what I had to do in my life. I had to be honest with myself when my daughter was in the hospital recovering from that liver transplant, and say, what's really important to me? Can I deal with selling my practice? What happens to my identity? What happens to my whole idea of building all this great wealth? Was that going to set me back for years and years and years? I'm going to tell you, it didn't. It actually expanded things for me. All right, Alex, where are we at with this one? You want to read it off? Oh, there, I can see it this time. Okay. All right. Well, it's pretty spread out, isn't it? With kind of the mean average right there at 5. We've got people on both ends of the spectrum. So really, really interesting. Interesting. Okay. I got a few people that are close to 9 or 10. Good for you. Those of you who are at 5, doesn't sound like you've got to make massive changes, but it sounds like there's some opportunities there. And some of you that are closer down on the lower end of the scale, again, it's just something to think about. I'm not judging anybody here. Look, I've made every mistake in the world in my life. And again, I don't live life with regrets. I just say, what can I learn going forward? So again, thanks for participating with that one. All right, let's shift forward again. So this was my replacement income strategy. And this is the first house that I acquired with my dad's help. He was my financier. We did a joint venture. I was the manager. He put up the credit and the down payment. We managed this asset. And over the years that I managed the asset, at the end of the holding period, we sold it when I graduated dental school. We sold it in 1983, bought it in 1980, sold it in 83 when I graduated. And we split right at $50,000 of capital gain profit. My $25,000 that I made managing that property, the time value I put into, quote, acquiring and managing this property was far less than the hours I spent working as a relatively high-end wait person at a restaurant. I did that all through college and dental school. It was a great gig. Was fun. I made good money. But when I realized how much more I made owning or having a controlling interest, well, it was really a half interest in this asset, this capital asset, this tangible asset, I never looked back. That experience, I think, changed my life forever, because I didn't work any less in the industry. I didn't work any less at all. But I had this, I call it like a side gig, but there was a plan to it. And I started acquiring and rolling my capital gain profit from this property into more properties. It's back in the 80s, in the 90s. And I built up a relatively sizable portfolio so that when Jenna was in the hospital with that liver transplant, I had a fair amount of properties that were paid off. That was my whole goal. Leverage hidden properties, take the extra money out of my practice, instead of putting it into a 401k or some savings plan or some other ridiculous investment that I would know nothing about. I just paid down debt. I controlled the asset first with little bits of money, used good debt, long-term debt, when I still had the cash flow, and I added more cash flow from my practice, paid these properties down, and like 20 years later, when Jenna was facing and went through the liver transplant, I had the capacity to make a decision, say, I can sell. I wasn't done. That wasn't going to be my last dollar. I could have gone back to dentistry. It just worked out that I didn't. All right, let's move on. So what's freedom? I say freedom is having options, choices, flexibility, living without want or need. That's my ultimate decision or definition of freedom. You can do anything else you want with that. And what I do today, I do because I love what I do. I love being relevant and helping people with teaching them things I learned in my life, many times the hard way. But I also used a lot of mentors that helped me get through some of the tough times. And I'm a big fan of finding the right people to surround yourself with, because I wouldn't be where I am today at all. Even going back to my childhood, if I hadn't been plugged in or around certain people that invested in me in my life at the right time, there's nothing like it. And you've probably got those people in your life too. You know that there's certain situations that just make have a big influence on you, that made something happen for you in a good way. I use this structure, this pyramid in Freedom Founders called the Five Freedoms. And you can see the base of it is financial freedom or freedom of economics. That's what everybody shoots for. The problem is nobody knows how much is enough. So the other four freedoms, which I think are, if not equally more important, that's freedom of time. That's your time, your personal time, discretionary time. Relationships, where you putting your focus of your time, where does that go? Your health. I mean, too many people, in my age are like, their health is shot. They can't do anything if they had all the money in the world. They just can't do anything anymore. And then finally, at the top is, what's your real purpose and meaning in life? I mean, maybe it's being, a professional in what you do. That may be like, that's it for you all day long. Awesome. There's still going to need to be a next for you at some point. So don't forget, there's more purpose beyond the chair, even though the chair side may be what you do. But the five freedoms, what I tell people is, you can't just focus on the financial piece and like get that done before you go to the others. You've got to do them simultaneously. Maybe some focus on more on some than others based on where you are. But if you're trying to do it in a linear succession, you're not going to get there. So that's a big thing I learned in my life, is don't just wait until I get everything right in a financial standpoint, because if I do that, I keep moving the goalposts and I'll never get there. You know what I'm talking about. So here's another question. Is again, scale of 1 to 10. So again, I want to just see where you are. How much autonomy do you feel like you possess over how you spend your time? How much autonomy? How much do you control your schedule? Let's be honest about that. Again, on the lower end of the scale, 1, you got no freedom at all. You're scheduled out. Somebody, your patients, your office, somebody else has got you scheduled out. And 10, you can do what you want to. You don't have to go into work. Maybe you don't have to do anything at all. So just, again, give us some idea where you are on your autonomy of time, and we'll come back and take a look at that scale here in just a moment. Again, just, be honest with yourself, right? I mean, this is not a time you have to like look the part and like you've got to have it all together, because none of us has it all together. We've all got gaps in our lives. And I just don't want you to I don't want you to live further with any that you may have, because I certainly did in my life, until I got a clue and realized that there was more important things than just trying to build more wealth. Even though wealth is a part of freedom, it's not everything, and certainly not everything to focus on early in life to the detriment of the other freedoms. All right, let's see what we got here, Alex. Oh, wow. Again, pretty spread out. So we've got some people down feeling like, yeah, a good number of you don't feel like you have a lot of freedom. And we go up to where we've got a few people. Very good. They're all up there in the 9s and 10s. Okay, good. It'd really be fun. I can't do this tonight, but it'd be fun for me to talk to some of the people that are at the 8, 9, and 10. And I'd just be curious, if you're there, what else are you looking for? I'm just that'd be a question I would have for you if I could talk to you. What else are you looking for? It sounds like you're good. Maybe you're just concerned again about the markets and saying, well, I've got this freedom, but I've got to take care of my nest egg and keep it steady, keep my principles safe. That could be part of it. You're there, but you want to protect it. So that may be the case. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. The freedom number. If you've read any of my books, most of my books have some aspect to the freedom number. It's basically how we reverse engineer to figure out what our gap is. Freedom number is, what does it take to fund your current lifestyle, call it your burn rate. Now that number is going to change throughout life. It can go up when you've got a family and you're growing a family. It could go back down when you quote, retire. But with the cost of living, I'm not planning on that. But whatever your freedom number is, we reverse engineer to figure out what you have in assets today, where those assets are deployed, and where you might be able to do better. And I'll give you an idea here in a minute how this figures in, but you can kind of see the basic formula there that we use. So reverse engineering. Let's just say your number was annually $150,000. You can put whatever number you want to there. Yours might be higher, yours might be lower, but whatever it is, let's just use this as a base number. So at a 1% return, pretty easy to do this in my head, I need $15 million of capital to invest it at 1% to produce my $150,000. Okay, anybody can do better than 1% today. We couldn't probably 4 years ago when interest rates were like next to zero, but today they've gone up to where you can get a risk-free return in treasuries or money markets, say at 5%. Let's go to 2%. Obviously, the math is it's going to cut your capital requirement in half. Go to 4%, cuts it in half again. So now we're down to 3.75. Let's go to 8%. Now we're down to 1.875 million in capital required to reduce that 150,000. What if I could get 10%? Down to 1.5 million. What if I could, whoops, I thought I had a 12% on there. Well, let's just leave it there. That's good enough. At 10%, I've obviously reduced my capital needs by a magnitude of 10. It was 15 million when I could only get a paltry 1%. Again, you can do better than that. I can at least get 4% today. But again, even at 4%, I've reduced, by 2/3 the amount of capital I need. So the point is, if you can make your money work for you as hard as you work for it, then you can reduce your capital need. And I don't mean you have to put a cap on it. It's exactly what I did when I figured out, could I sell my practice back in 2004 to be with my daughter? And I looked at what I had, look what was coming in, and I had enough to pull that off at least for a couple of years, What I found out later was my ability to focus more on tangible assets outside of the business of my practice, which was great. I was able to build that wealth even faster. But again, I developed some skill sets and a network, and it made a big difference for me. So what's more important to you, net worth or cash flow? Let's take a look at that. Here's the traditional financial model, the retirement model. I just pulled this off the internet somewhere. It looked like a great graph because what they show you is the accumulation phase, right? It's on the left side. It's in red. That's the accumulation phase. You put your money into the 401k, your cash balance plan, defined benefit plan. You just pile it in there, and someone else is going to take care of it for you and hopefully grow it up to some number. And then when you retire, you start to bring that down. You start to go through depletion, right? That's the traditional model. I don't believe in that model. I do believe in accruing some amount of net worth over time, but my model is about the sustainable replacement income. I never want to kill the golden goose, if you will. I want the golden goose to continue to produce eggs. In fact, I want the golden goose to be hedged to inflation so I can at some point pass that golden goose on to my heirs, teaching them how to do the same thing. If I have a depletion model, who knows what's left? And notice in this model, whoever made this algorithm out, age 80 is where it's all over. It's not my plan personally to be done at 80. But many of the plans that financial advisors come up with is like they say, well, we can, based on our model and plug in for inflation and rates of return and all their variables, you can make it probably till 92. And then they'll say, well, that's only if we don't have a significant market correction in the first 3 years after you retire. I mean, I've heard that over and over and over again. So you get my point. I'm not a real big fan of the traditional financial model. In fact, I think it limits people. It's really the thing that keeps people on the treadmill working harder and longer because there is no answer in the traditional financial model. If the traditional financial advisor says, if you're healthy enough and you can still do the work you do, just keep doing it. That's kind of what they tell you. And I think that's a sad way to, quote, finish a career because that's not, I think, what you signed up for. So again, accumulation versus replacement. The uncertainty of how much is enough on the accumulation side versus the specificity of having an actual freedom number and reverse engineering to pick it up and say, what do I need to build and what kind of rate of return do I need to get to make this happen? Depletion of principal on the accumulation side, it's unsustainable versus sustainability, no depletion of principal on our replacement income side. Accumulation, you've got vulnerability to a lot of market volatility. When it goes up, it's great, but when it comes down, it's not so great. Versus consistent, predictable income despite the market cycles. I can be more sustainable because I've done this for over 4 decades in real estate. Not saying that real estate doesn't go with cycles. And I know some of you are thinking right now, well, wait a minute, I'm hearing commercial real estate is going down. Yes, it is. But again, I showed you with the capital stack, I don't have to be in equities the whole time, do I? I can look ahead, and real estate gives me a lot more time to look ahead because it's not that market's inefficient, and it gives me a lot more time to see where things are moving. I can make moves well in advance versus stock market. When the emotional sentiment, the fear hits, drops like a rock. I mean, every time it goes up like stair steps and drops like an elevator, I think is what people say. On the accumulation side, I mean, there's always the risk of chasing yield. I got to get more, more, more versus managing the risk and taking what the market gives you. I'm really, really big on talking about what does the market give us today? What can we take with a relative risk mitigated basis? The disadvantages of tax deferral plans, which is your 401k, higher future taxation. When you take that money out, it's going to be taxed at your then ordinary income tax rate. It's going to be higher than it is today. That's probably not a great move. Block box, your money is tied up till you're at least age 59 and a half. Opportunity cost is there. You've lost the ability to put it in other places, which if you're here to be your own financial advocate, I wouldn't want my money tied up in a lockbox I couldn't touch. You want to be on the forefront of managing your assets. You might want to use other people to help you, but you want to be the orchestrator. It's locked up in a lockbox. You can't touch it. Now, I will say this. If you've got a 401k, you've got retirement accounts, you can self-direct those. You can self-direct them through custodians that allow you to self-direct into alternative assets. You don't have to stay in the market. So if you have one, you can still turn it into an asset and I'm not going to call it a liability, but you can make it work harder for you by moving it into alternative assets or whatever amount you want to. Many, many of our Freedom Founder members make that change relatively early on in the course of their work with us because they see the opportunity to at least diversify and get their assets in their retirement accounts working in what we consider more stable environments. Again, it's my bias, but I'll leave it there. Ignorance by abdication. If I just put it in the 401k, someone else will take care of it. I don't really have to do anything. I just put it in there, and it'll be good when I get there. I haven't seen a generation yet that has been able to totally, quote, retire on their retirement accounts. Now, it's an adjunct, but by itself, no, not going to do it. Not going to do it today. You don't learn anything either. As I mentioned earlier, with future taxation, you're going to be in higher tax brackets. The money that comes out of those, you get no long-term capital gains benefits. You get no step up in basis to your heirs, and you pay ordinary income taxes on the distributions. As I mentioned, stepped up in basis. That's basically when you die, you have assets. The step up in basis means that your heirs, if they sold those assets the day after you died or the day you died, essentially, they pay no tax. Versus in your retirement accounts, you get none of that. They're going to pay tax on the gain that you had. It's not a good wealth generation plan, amongst other things. It's just not a good plan. It's better than nothing. Your retirement accounts are better than nothing, but I don't think you're here for just better than nothing. I think you came here for a different purpose. I mentioned other tax benefits or loss besides long-term capital gain treatment. If you've got other assets in there that could be depreciated, like real estate, you lose that. Cost segregation, you lose that. You lose the ability to exchange, to do tax-deferred exchanges. You lose a lot in your retirement accounts. But again, for people who aren't going to do anything and don't want to learn, it's probably the best thing for them to do. More ROI, more return on investment is not the answer, but that's what everybody chases. It's not the answer. We've got to talk just a minute about inflation. The impact of 5%, just 5% inflation over 20 years. If you take a look and follow this down, if we go down to 10 years at 5% inflation, you've lost about 40% of your purchasing power in just 10 years at 5%. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't believe the government stats. In the world I live in today, my inflation is running close to double digits right now. When they think interest rate or inflation CPI is running, I guess it's down to almost 3 now. In my world, that's not true. They've changed the metrics on the CPI many, many times since the 80s. And if you go back and use the metrics that they used in the 80s, we would be at close to double digits right now. But pick your number. Here's an interesting one. At 12% inflation on $1 million in just 6 years, that's the rule of 72. You take 12% divided into the number 72. In 6 years, your purchasing power is halved. Go another 6 years to 12 years, it's halved again. You're down to 25% of the purchasing power of that asset. That's why, in my opinion, you can't use the retirement accumulation model, which turns into depletion, because the depletion is going to go a lot faster than you thought it would, because you're not building it back up again. Okay, so economic storm preparations checklist. Now, there's a place you can get this, and it's real easy, but I'm going to run through it really fast. Your burn rate. You've got to create margin. You've got to look at assets versus expenses. That's what we do with the Freedom Number in Freedom Founders. Reduce and eliminate debt, particularly short-term versus long-term debt. You can use debt as an asset. If you get long-term fixed rate, low interest rate, it can be an asset or versus liability. Maintaining dry powder, meaning liquidity. We talked about liquidity in my asset allocation triangle. That gives you autonomy, it gives you margin, and can take advantage of those opportunities that will come in as the market turns. I like real assets, tangible assets, close to the earth, like the billionaires. That's where I want to be. That's preponderance of what I use. But I think if anything, you want to at least diversify into some more tangible assets, probably more than most of you have done in the past. I think it's a time for you to look at that really hard. You can keep what you want to in the markets, no judgment, but I think you've got to be hedging, more into learning how to do tangible assets. Your financial advisors typically, other than ETFs and mutual funds or REITs in real estate, they're not going to want to help you there because they don't get paid on other tangibles. This is something you're going to have to, venture out on your own or do with somebody else who does it well. Business resiliency. Having a business during economic volatility, a good business, like many of you have, that's probably your get out of jail card, free card. I mean, mainly it keeps you resilient during volatile times with a good business. Yeah, you got to work. It's not passive, but at least it lets you keep up and make up for lost time. It gives you additional insurance on your income side versus people that are W-2 wage earners that really have no margin at all. I mean, they're in a position where they can lose their jobs and have layoffs, right? You're in a position where if you make good decisions with your capital that's in your business, you can at least float things for longer and maybe even make up for lost time with the opportunities there. Your business equity. Yeah, that's a big one too, right? Maintaining your value of that equity, planning your exit strategy. Big part of what we do in Freedom Founders because so many come with the thought that they want to, in the near term, exit. Well, how do you do that today? Well, there's a lot of variables, which I can't even touch on tonight, but figuring that out and doing that well, it's got to be done well because you get really one chance at that, right? And then your personal financial family plan, evacuation plan, your black book, meaning all the key people, resources, assets, where's everything at? It's really important that you build that. It's again something we really help our members do because most people put it off like most things, like estate planning and wills. People just don't do that stuff because it's not urgent, right? It's like, I don't need it right now until the day you needed it and then you didn't do it, right? And then your relational resiliency. Your best insurance policy, my best insurance policy is not the assets, not actually insurance policies, which I do have. It's people. It's my close people that I've curated over many years that bring a lot of wisdom and really are people who I know would bail me out of a problem, a financial problem. If I had one, if I needed somebody, you've got to have those relationships. Really important. Now, if you like to dig more into building your financial arc, which is really what that last slide was about, I've got a book that's coming out in just a few weeks. And if you want to pre-order it, you can go to financialarcbook.com. That's financialarcbook.com. You can go ahead and get on the pre-order. I'm really proud of this book because it builds on a lot of the concepts that I'm talking about tonight. You'll flesh it out for you in some more detail, but also be something you could share with a spouse or a friend if you want them to kind of be on the same page and have the talking points that you want to have with them. All right. I'd like to find out from you what your concerns are about real estate. Here's going to be the questions to answer to choose from. You don't understand how it works. Don't have enough time to invest in it. You don't have access, like where do you go? And then finally, real estate, you think it's going to take a big hit. So which of those four would be your primary concern about real estate? I'd just love to see what your thinking is. Again, there is no wrong answer here at all. And these are all valid answers. I just like to see where you stand in your thinking in terms of your propensity to invest in real estate. What would be the area that would hold you back the most from doing more with what you might want to do there? And we'll give a minute for you to answer the question, and I'll let Alex, when he gets those curated, we'll see where everybody hits on this. Last few surveys have been pretty much spread out across the board, which has been interesting. We'll see if this one comes in similar or not. And I'm getting down towards the end here, folks. So stay with me. I'll keep this tight. All right, see where we are. Okay, interesting. All right, so the biggest one is don't have access, where to start. That's a big one. It's an inefficient market. Real estate is. That's where the advantage is. But the disadvantage is, yeah, you can't, just going to the MLS or there's some brokerage is not the way to do it. You've got to have access. Time it was in second place. Don't understand it. which again, education understanding is big. And then not so many people worried about it taking a big hit. Okay. Well, yeah, again, I'm not worried either because I can put myself in the right place in the capital stack. So I'm with you there. All right. Thanks for your answers. All right. Let's go on to, all right. So what I love to do is help people with the main problem being solving the problem of buying back time. I told you my story back in the early decade of the 2000s when I needed to buy back more time to be with my daughter. And figuring out how to do that and how to do that well was the biggest learning lesson for me. And helping other people, not with the same problem I had, but wherever they are on the spectrum of their life, early in career with young families and kids, well, that's a time you don't want to miss out on. But again, do I spend time with my family, or do I not build my practice up the way I need to build my practice up? I mean, those are problems, are they or not? Mid-career, I'm getting more burned out. I'd like to be able to slow it down, but can I really? This is my high time. I'm gonna be making more money now. And then being on the back end, do I have enough to actually replace my income if I decide to sell out completely? These are the questions that people come up with that we are able to solve in Freedom Founders. In my experience over 4 decades, real estate is one of the best ways, not the only way, but it's one of the best ways to create passive income. And again, passive can be on a spectrum. I think it's still more semi-active. Passive is like buying a treasury, buying a bond, treasury bond, note, bill, CD, money market. That's passive. To really do real estate, even from a quote passive standpoint, you've got to have some involvement, some involvement, because you don't want to again do like a 401k, just hand it over to somebody and say, here, go run with it and see what you can do, which a lot of people do. And in a bull market, that works out. But when we're going to market correction, that's not going to work out well at all. I can promise you. We know that most high net worth investors believe that real estate should have a place in their portfolio. But the question or the answer you gave, how do you do it? The problem is most practitioners, wherever you are in business, too busy to develop the skill sets to confidently invest in real estate in today's uncertain economy. I only did it because I started, over 40 years ago. So I've got the compounded time and experience. When I had more time than money, if I was where I am today, I wouldn't have the ability to expend that amount of time or energy. It would be a bad use, a bad investment of my time to do it the way I did it 40 years ago. A lot of people try it. They become what I call accidental landlords, or they may just say of your friends and family, hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing this over here. I'm putting my money in the syndication over here, and I hear these guys are good. And, well, I should do that too. Again, that might have worked during a bull market. Today, I think it would be very, very dangerous and probably a real abdication of your duties to your family. I wouldn't go there without a knowledge base. In Freedom Founders, what we are is like a shortcut. We enable our members, our practitioners, to fold time, to collapse time, to become much more sophisticated investors while still they can be busy in their practice and spend time with their family, which is really what you want to be doing as much as you can. So the key to financial advocacy is twofold. One, it is education. It's education. You've got to have education here. Education creates self-reliance. Who doesn't want more self-reliance, particularly in the financial realm outside of your business or practice, which is where you put all your reliance to date. And that's a good place. But you've got to also be able to take your money, your capital outside of your practice and be self-reliant there. You cannot, I will emphasize, you cannot abdicate that to other people. You can use other people for advice, which I think is a good idea, but don't let other people run the show for you. Self-reliance plus your behavior changes because education gives you more confidence. You're going to have the outcome changes you want. I see it over and over again in Freedom Founders. The level of confidence that comes from the education that happens in a relatively short time is life-changing for our members. As couples, they see the world, their life, their families totally differently in a relatively short time. The other part that we do in Freedom Founders is introductions. Introductions to curated investment opportunities. This is where it's done with you. We don't sell you real estate. We don't have a fund, but we do it together. See, I need the same thing. I want the same thing. I love having a community because we leverage our community so that we can attract the highest level operators. We can put some demands on what we will accept or won't accept so that I don't have to put myself out there as an individual investor and go, well, I just hope that fund or that syndication might be a good thing in real estate. That REIT might be good. I should diversify. Here, you don't have to do that. Here, you get to look at and compare and contrast right in the realm of a group and a community who's doing it all together. It's really fun. It's really fun to do this where we break these PPMs, the operating agreements down together. We've got a securities attorney and a chief financial officer on retainer outside Freedom Founders that weigh in with us, and we really get to do this together. So you're not all alone trying to figure this out by yourself, because it would be a deep dive to do it by yourself. Proximity and risk. So if you think about this curve right here, I've got proximity on the y-axis, I've got risk on the horizontal. What I'm looking at here is proximity. So proximity when you do it yourself. That's like you and your practice, your business, your own business. That is do it yourself. And that's what it should be. That's the way we were built, our education. The proximity is you've got close proximity. Your risk is lower. Your return should be higher in that case, right? So let's go up one level. B, done with you. In this case, your proximity is not going to be as close as you're not going to go out and I'm not going to teach you how to go do short-term rentals or how to buy a multifamily and manage it. I'm not going to, or how to restore it or flip houses. I'm not going to teach that to you. But what we are going to do together is figure out how we can invest through other people and how to vet those people as operators and the asset classes. So again, you're a little bit further out on the curve in terms of proximity. Your risk is going to go up a little bit, but again, it's a trade. Do you have the time to put in to do it all yourself, or do you learn and get educated so you can do it and have the more time you want? That's where I am in my life today. And then lastly would be done for you. I mean, to me, that's like the application to the stock market. Here's my money. Go take it. Do something with it. Hopefully make it good. And I'll see you in 5 years when I retire. So you can see the differences there. In Freedom Founders, it's B for us, B, done with you. So why does Freedom Founders work so well? In the right hands. And again, in the right hands is a key. We are very good at helping people select whether or not they're fit for Freedom Founders. It's not something I'm going to do on the call tonight. I'll give you some ideas of characteristics, but it's very important, just like you select your patients. You select the patients you want for the treatment you want to do at the price point you want. That's your decision. You've got to be very selective in doing that, because you know you take high risk if you just take anybody for any procedure without having a meeting of the minds. Very, very important. So you can go solo, you can have it done for you, or you can have it the way we do it in Freedom Founders is done with you. This is the kind of collaboration we do in Freedom Founders. Zoom calls, trainings there, live member meetings. This is the place where these discussions happen at a deep, deep level. And we talk about life, but we talk about investments, we talk about making changes. Being a part of a community has been one of the best things I've done in my life. And I'm parts of other communities besides the one I am privileged to facilitate, which is Freedom Founders. One of our members, younger family, the Cowans are in their early 40s with their two relatively young sons. Created enough real estate income to make critical evolutions and elevate his leadership in practice. Essentially, Dr. Cowan is still in practice. He doesn't want to quit practice, but he's elevated himself to a point where he's got partnerships. He's got enough outside income from real estate to give him that assurance policy. He's built that plan B, but he loves what he does because he's not in the chair, 4 days a week or 2.5 days a week. He does what he wants to in the procedures, and he really mentors and helps other people. It's done at a relatively young age. So step one is you got to clarify a plan and strategy. It's what we do. Step to get a clear real estate investing plan that is personalized to the goals and the timeline that you have for the values in your life. Get crystal clear on how much is enough. This is a revelation that happens every time we do our blueprint weekends with our members. Is the couples for the first time actually say, what do we really need? It's the same question I had to ponder 20 years ago when I was sitting in the hospital with Jenna recovering from her liver transplant. That's the basic math I did to come up with the conclusion: I can sell. I can buy back time now. You've got to evaluate what investments are working, where there are opportunities for better, more efficient returns, making your capital work harder for you. Taking action. That's a big problem, right? I mean, we get scared. Like, we don't have the confidence. Like when you're with a community, you actually see what other people have done who are just like you and go, okay, it's not so scary. I can talk to them. They did this. Hey, and they're still living and breathing, right? It's a big confidence builder because we can get that paralysis of analysis. We're overeducated in many areas, and we don't take action because we're afraid to make a big mistake. I get it. I totally get it. So our blueprint days are what we do. You get a clarity, a plan to go forward. There's just some pictures of the groups. Small group. I love small groups where we can really dig in and talk, where couples come together. Another one of our couples, Bob and Gertrude Dubansky. Financially, we've been taught all along to just save money in our 401k, but that wasn't working for us. We had to do something else. They came in, 3.5, a year after COVID, probably 2021. Burned out, just burned out. And within 9 months, practice was up for sale. Within a year, sold, left California, high tax state, moved to be closer to family in Nevada, loving life. I'm not saying we work miracles, but it's mindset changes. It's seeing how you can make your money work for you instead of just giving it to the markets and hoping the markets with your fingers crossed are going to make it happen. Changing lives is what I love to do. It's what you do too. I just changed lives in a different way today. So who's Freedom Founders for? Good fit. Real quickly, coachable attitude, well-managed debt, desire to be passive investor versus active, understand the value of real estate, but you're not sure how to get started. Not a fit if you're still growing and acquiring practices. If you're in that growth stage in your life and your practice, with your practice, that's where you should focus, really. If you want to be active or do it yourself, it's not what we do in Freedom Founders. If that's where you are in life, like I was 40 some years ago, do that first. Learn as you go. Come to Freedom Founders when you want to buy more time back. If you want those higher returns, if you're like shooting for the moon, like you could a few years ago, not going to get that here. We're very, very cautious, conservative, prudent. We're about principal preservation and taking what the market gives us. If you're still growing your capital base, in other words, you're still young in practice, you still want to build up some steam, yeah, probably better do that first. Save up some money, put it in the market, index funds, save up. So if you want us to help you create passive income through a real estate portfolio so that you can stop relying on your practice, here's the opportunity. And I love doing this. It's called the Catalyst Group. I've done this probably 6 or 7 times over the last 3 years. A couple times a year, I'll do a 4-week online cohort, small group. I told you I love small groups. This one's going to start in the middle of September. Each week, I'll tell you what we're doing each week, but here's where you can go to sign up. The investment is very nominal. And I'll also tell you it's risk-free. How's that? How's that for a guy who puts it all out there? Now I'm only going to take you if you show up and you do the course, but it's not going to steal a lot of your time. And I'll tell you how we do it in a minute. But this is where you can go. Is take a picture of this. We'll put it in the chat. But I take a small number, all right? And that small number can fill up quickly. So I'm not telling you this to make you do something you don't want to do. I'm just saying if you want to do this, jump in. We can always have a call just to make sure it's good for you, okay? Because it's not going to start for a few weeks. So if you want to get on the list and be there, kind of like if you want to go buy a car that you can't get, you put your name on the list, and when the car comes up, go, well, it's not actually the color I wanted. Okay, we'll just throw you back in the ring, and you can do something later. So this is just like get in line. That's how you do it. So here's what we'll cover during the 4 weeks, and then I'll tell you how we cover it to save you time. How to create wealth in up markets and down markets. Big thing you've got to learn now. How do you do this traversing market cycles? How to find the best investments for any stage of the market cycle. Again, that goes back to the capital stack I showed you earlier. What to stay away from. Very, very important today, what to stay away from. I can save you more in potential losses, probably at least as much as I can help you gain. The capital stack, I talked about that briefly. Debt versus equity investments, when to be where, and what those look like, and where are they? The best opportunities for creating passive cash flow in today's economy. If you're looking for replacement income, which some of you are looking more for that because you're looking to exit, how do you get that sustainable, predictable income? Where is that going to be? And getting it at better than treasury rates or CD rates at 4.5%, 5%. Where are you going to get that? I can show you. The anatomy of a deal. Creative ways to engage with real estate as a passive investor. I didn't have time to do that framework tonight, but it's a great framework, and we see how that works. Light bulbs will go off for you. I can promise you. It's not the way we typically think, but it's made a huge difference in my life. How to evaluate the current market cycle to avoid the bad investment strategies, and then funds and syndications. That's been a big deal for a lot of you probably, or some of you, and it's probably worked out relatively well. But right now, a lot of them are in modes of distress for lots of reasons. Sometimes the operators were not so proficient that they thought they were. Interest rates are up, variable rate debt, lots of things that a lot of investors didn't evaluate going in. It's one of the things that we look really hard at Freedom Founders so that you don't get stuck in that kind of thing. Tax benefits, of course, that's the icing on the cake, but how to use the tax benefits in real estate to offset some of your tax liability. So here's how this is going to work. Part of it's on-demand training, part of it is live, okay? And I love the live part, but why I do on-demand training is because I create modules each week that are relevant to the current market cycle and the actual pace or the blueprint that I lay out for you each week. So you're going to get short modules of videos from me with frameworks. You get to study those on your own time, because why would I waste your time to show up on a call at a certain time just to go through a bunch of stuff when you can do that on your own? Where I want to engage with you each week is our weekly call, our live call, where you've had a chance to go through the modules, and now we talk about it. Now we have discussion. I'm not presenting a bunch of stuff like I did tonight. We're engaging in a big way. So those calls usually go at least 90 minutes. I've gone 2 hours on those calls. I love doing it. During the week, you're not left alone. You got questions, you're going through some of the trainings I've given you. You want to ask questions. Maybe you've got deals you're looking at. Maybe you're looking at funds and syndications. You can bring those, during the week on calls. I'll break those down with you. I'll do whatever you want to do. This is a customized small group cohort. That's why I love to do it, because we get to engage. You get to know each other. Everybody's going to be at a different place in their life and what they're looking for. But I'll take you through the stages of how to look at alternatives, where you are in your life, what kind of timeline you're looking for, what goals you're looking for, and how to do it safely in the marketplace we have today. I'll leave you with this. The longer you put off building your portfolio, the harder it's going to be to confidently gain freedom from your practice. It's just a guarantee. Don't put this kind of thing off. Wherever you are, don't put it off. You're never going to have more time than you do today. And I know you may not have time, but when are you going to have more time? You're not. That's the problem. We'll never have more time. Later is a word for never. Think about that. I'll do it later. That's what I call someday syndrome. The important is rarely urgent. The urgent is rarely important. Do not become a slave to the merely urgent. Urgent the tyranny of the urgent ruins more people because they never can get ahead of the urgency. You've got to prioritize and do things that are going to give you what I call an inflection point, a big move forward. If you're a practice professional who desires to create more freedom and autonomy, this is your time to take the first step towards freedom. I can promise you, it will be life-changing. So if you want to join me in freedom, in the freedom journey in September, here it is, freedomfounders.com/catalyst group. At least plug in. You got time. One of us are happy to jump on a call with you just to nail it. Say, is this really right for you? The risk-free part is if we both decide before we hit September that if we decide you're a good fit and you're serious about stepping up and doing it, then I give you the first 2 weeks to test drive it. You do the first 2 weeks, and during the first 2 weeks, you go, you know what, David, it's not exactly what I was looking for whatever reason. I don't care. It doesn't hurt my feelings. You just say it wasn't for me, and we'll just refund you on the spot. I have no problem with that whatsoever. This is not a moneymaker for me. This is an opportunity for me to help people. And some people will actually come and move to Freedom Founders at the right time and the right place. But I get to know you. You get to know me. You get to see where you are in your freedom journey. It's a really simple, easy way to, number one, test drive what I talk about here tonight and see it like I do it at the Blueprint Weekends, which I do live for our members. You're going to get a rendition of that in this 4 weeks. It's very, very powerful if you come and really, really dig in and want to do it. Now, if you want to book a call anytime, you can go to freedomfounders.com/discover, book a call with one of my team, Alex, you saw earlier here tonight, who's helping me with the webinar. He's been with me going 8-9 years now. He understands exactly what we do. He's very, very good. We don't do sales here. We invite people, the right people. We can only do that when we know who you are and what you're looking for to see if you would be qualified for it, like the Catalyst Group, or even to be part of Freedom Founders. We're very, very selective, just like you should be with your patients. We're very selective because I want to help people that I know I can help. So again, ideally, what you want to do, if you have any desire, jump into the Catalyst Group. We can still do a call. If you just are really, really, really hesitant, well, still just book a call. All right, you can step into this somehow. Or if you want to fast track, if you've been following me for quite a while and you're just like, you know what, I want to just jump into Freedom Founders. Again, if we feel like you're a good fit, we can fast track you into Freedom Founders. We give you the same risk-free as I do in the Catalyst Group. In Freedom Founders, as a member, we give you the first 2 months, 60 days, complete immersion into Freedom Founders. And if during that time, either one of us say, hey, you know what, it's just not quite the right time for you, no harm, no foul. It's our no regrets policy. I'm really big on that. So you have nothing to lose if you want to try working with me on any basis. Catalyst Group is a really ideal place because even doing that before you become a member of Freedom Founders, it's going to give you a strong onboarding run rate to jump in and really go for it. So I think that's really all I've got for tonight. Alex, I'm going to stop the screen share, and I am happy, as I said earlier, to stay here and answer some questions. So what do we got?
Thank you for sharing tonight, David. Thanks for sharing from your heart. We have some terrific questions from the audience tonight. I'll jump into some of them here. We'll see how many of them we can get through, and if need be, maybe we can do a follow-up afterwards as well if we're not able.
That's the thing. That's the thing too. I'll say, because some of you may need to go. Here's what I will do. We'll take as many questions as you want to tonight for a while. I love this. So I will take additional questions, and I'll actually come back and create additional training. And for everybody who is here to live, I'll send it out to you. So I will do that in addition. But let's take some questions tonight. Okay.
Great. So the first question is from Dante, And he asks, in your experience, do you think rents will always keep pace with inflation?
Not hand in hand. There's an ebb and flow to that, and I think we've seen that particularly during COVID, where yes, valuations and rents went up a lot, but again, COVID was like a very outlier, unique period of time because all the money that flooded in. Generally speaking, yeah, you're going to see a correlation, but it may not. It may be staggered. It may be staggered. You may see valuations, go up, prices go up. You may see rents catch up. Sometimes you'll see rents go the other way. But generally speaking, we will. I do want to add something to that. I said earlier, I think we're going to be in a period of more anemic growth going forward. And I know I talked about recency bias. We've all seen what real estate's done in the last few years. I mean, in the last decade even, but the last few years, it's been amazing. I just want you to get your expectations set. I don't think we're going to see that for some time. That doesn't mean real estate's not good, but you've got to be more operational in how you buy it, how you manage it, whoever's managing it. And you can't base everything on the appreciation factor. So you've got to look hard at that and look at different markets. Real estate is a neat thing to invest in because it's not a national, there's not a national market for it. It's local and it's asset based. So you can carve it up and look at different places. Some places might make sense. You say, well, that's an undervalued market. And if I buy there, I'm probably going to get some forced appreciation and maybe rents will go up. Different things to look at. But overall, there is a correlation. And that's why we like intangible assets, because there's definitely a correlation over time to inflation. So good question, Dante.
This next question, David, is from Jay, and he's asking. He says regarding the nuts and bolts of Freedom Founders, how do you determine your investment opportunities within Freedom Founders?
Okay, determine your investment opportunities. Well, your investment opportunities.
Yeah, I think, if I may, David, I think he may be asking just about, maybe a little bit about the investment review process and how we evaluate investment opportunities as a community, and maybe what criteria we utilize for that.
Yeah. So going back to the capital stack diagram I had, we look at both, equities and debt, being a private credit is what we call it. We look at both and we curate that, and we have a number of different sponsors that sometimes they'll offer, one or the other, equity or debt. Some have some of both, hybrids. Bottom line is we want to be qualitative and not just quantitative. Quantitative is like, well, historically this fund or this asset class has produced XYZ, right? And we go, well, that sounds good. But qualitative means we want to look underneath and see what's inside, a syndication or a fund. What is the specific asset or assets, and see what they look like. We want to know something about the sponsor, right? What's their track record? How long have they been in their particular model, not just in real estate, but running their particular model, multifamily, self-storage, debt fund. How long they've been doing that? We want to know what the legal documents look like for the offering. So I'm a limited partner, as you would be. If it's a syndication, what do I need to look at for a PPM? What's in there? How am I protected as an investor? Or a fund, same thing. What's the offering documents look like? How long is my money tied up? How much leverage is this operator using? I mean, there's a whole lot of criteria that we break down as a community. And the biggest piece we've added in the last year or so, to me, is probably of all three, it's probably the most important, but all three are important. Background check of the sponsor, their legal documentation structure of what's inside the offering, but the financial review. Not an audit, but we have a outside CFO who actually goes in and does a interview and looks at the books and the cash flow management, segregation of capital, balance sheet, profit and loss, and does an interview with their controller or CPA, whoever the person is who runs the cash flow operations. To me, that's the biggest piece that gives me a greater level of confidence that this operator, where everything else is checking the boxes for me, well, he's been around a while, checked him out. He's historically had some good returns, but I got to know, does he know, or does his company operate their cash flow management well? Because that's going to make or break a lot of people. So we have the curation of all these different investment opportunities, and then we break them down. We call the internal, the IRC, the Investment Review Committee. I started thinking IRS. No, we don't have the IRS in here. And that's part of our process. So that's how you, as an individual member of Freedom Founders, get to look. But cool thing, again, you're doing it with the entire community. where we get on calls and we're breaking things down together after, the legal looks at them, financial review, we break them down together. So you're part of a group, a cohort that's been doing this for quite some time. And you get to learn at the same time before you actually, get your feet wet and jump into it. What have other people done? What have they learned? What if mistakes have been made? What have been made? It's a great place to, really protect your building your confidence going forward before you jump in, so to speak. So I hope that answered that question.
That's great. David, we'll take maybe just one or two more questions here, and then we might wrap up for the evening. Wendy asked a question: how do you move 401ks into alternative options?
Well, the main thing, Wendy, is there is a host of licensed custodians that are licensed to administer retirement accounts and allow their account holders, you, me, who has a retirement account or a 401k, to invest in alternative investments, outside of the stock market, which is the traditional, right? So these custodians are specialized in this arena. To do this, you have to, transfer, move your, current retirement account, whatever status that's in, to the custodian, or you can move parts of it. You don't have to do the whole thing. You can still have money with your Vanguard, Fidelity, your 401k manager, but you can move some of your account money to a self-directed custodian, and through that custodian, then you can invest in anything real estate that you want to. So that's a great question, and a lot of people don't know that, and that's why I mentioned it kind of quickly tonight in passing. But I didn't want to make it sound like retirement accounts were just some worthless liability. No, they're not. They're not at all. And most people have them, by the way, that come to Freedom House. I mean, I had one for a while until I decided I didn't want one anymore and converted it, completely outside to my own hands. But when you have one, it's great when you know how to, I think, make it work better for you and have more of the controls on it than you do in the financial markets.
And this last question, David, is from Douglas. Douglas, I think you and I may have a call scheduled tomorrow afternoon. I'm looking forward to speaking with you. His question relates to international real estate investing. He asks, what is your experience in international real estate investing? I'm thinking of Panama specifically.
Okay. Well, fair question. I'll be very transparent. I don't. I don't. And maybe that's just a limitation that I personally have. The way I look at my investing, and this is just me, is I diversify, but I mostly diversify, in tangible assets and real estate. I just keep my real estate investments here in this country. For one thing, to the extent that I feel like we still have contract law in this country, and sometimes that may be something we see slipping away, but I think our rights are stronger here. I've heard of, through friends and other people who invested outside the states, there's been problems. No, I'm not saying always, and certainly if I felt secure in other countries, having some diversification internationally might not be a bad idea. But I'm just a little more risk averse, so I don't have experience there to give you. I'll just leave it there, but it's a great question.
David, we had one more question slip in here from an anonymous user, viewer, and he's asking, is now a good time to move up to a more expensive home, i.e. 1.5 million or more?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because I don't have enough context, honestly, for me to tell you that, right? I mean, I need to hear a lot more about, your personal goals, your life, your family, what kind of debt you have, what your business looks like. I mean, there's a whole host of things I look at before I tell you yes or no. All right. The easy answer would be, don't do it. Right. I mean, that's kind of like, I'm conservative and I say, like, rather than extend myself more in a time when we might go into a recession, but you know what? You might be doing pretty well in a lot of respects, and you might have a family that, this home has got some really neat features to it that can really create some memories. So I don't want to give you an answer either way, if that's okay. There's just too many things I have to look at. But this is kind of the fun stuff we do in Freedom Founders. When you bring that kind of question and you're in a small group where you feel safe to like spill the beans, so to speak, and tell people a little bit about your numbers and things like that, which I'll do in a small group. I won't do in a big group. Then you get to get some feedback, not just from me, but from other people, and kind of help you dissect through and figure out, what it is you're looking at. Because every decision's a trade. There's always a trade-off, right? There's not really generally a right or wrong. I mean, there may be a heavier propensity towards one side or the other of do it or don't do it. But for me, having a chance to throw that provocation out to other people that I know, like, and trust and get some feedback really helps me to make that decision more quickly than just like spinning it in my head over and over and over again, going, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Then typically the answer is I don't do anything because I'm afraid. But when you actually get some feedback from people, it's huge. And that's why I love mastermind groups. It's a huge opportunity. So there's my non-answer.
That's great, David. Thanks for sharing from your heart. I think that'll wrap it up for the Q&A tonight. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you can always email them in or text in, and David's always happy to address in blogs or follow-up videos as applicable.
Yep, got the podcast every week and lots of videos I put out. So yeah, if you send us questions, I love to answer questions. So you send us questions, and if it's something that looks relevant, we'll put it out there in some form or fashion and answer it. Happy to. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here tonight. I enjoyed it. We'll do more in the future, but hope we get to meet sometime in the near future as well. All right. Take care. Have a good evening, everybody.